Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Hugh McKenzie. Welcome, Hugh.
Good to be here, thanks Gavin.
Now, we haven't given you any titles, we haven't connected you to any organisation, but that's because you've done a plethora of things. And so, Hugh, you're standing on your own merits today.
Well, I never really felt I'm ever on my own merits, but I'm interested in lots of things, and one of them is the pro-life issue, and I have been involved in the pro-life movement for quite a few years.
All right, well now we're going to wind the clock back a little bit, because there was a time when you were for abortion.
Yeah, to my everlasting shame, that's true. When I left school at 18, the Menhinnitt ruling was pretty new and it was a hot topic, and abortion clinics were pressing for being legal. So it was in the newspapers, and abortion was in the Crimes Act. So I was quite conscious of it. But I was brought up in a Catholic family, went to Catholic schools, primary and secondary, and people talk about abortion as a religious issue, and I see it as a human issue.
Why is that?
Well, it's about human life, and I said my everlasting shame. For somehow or other I got through my 12 years of schooling and went off to do medicine at Melbourne University. In this context of abortion being a controversial issue as to whether it should still be a crime or not, I suppose that's when it was starting worldwide. And I believed that it was okay. And I think I probably thought that, or I know I thought that, because I saw it solving problems for people. And you don't like to think of people having problems. You like the doctors to cure them, or somebody to sort them out, or the psychologists to help them, or whatever it is. And we help each other. That's what we're here for, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, you've had a mixture of disciplines. For instance, you studied medicine for a while.
I did, and I failed in that first year.
Okay, but we'll come back to that. Not the failure, but just something that you discovered. Then you did law.
I did law and economics after the failure, and I suppose it was a springboard, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's my question. Later on, you go back to the great author of the Hippocratic Oath. Yes, Hippocrates was several hundred years before Christ, and this notion of the abortion issue being a religious issue, it preceded Christianity, where that founder, or the founder of medicine he's regarded as, set out the principles, the ethical principles for the medical profession. And it included doing no harm and not being involved in abortion. I can't quote it to you now, but that's, in our scientific age, that seems to have changed enormously. It doesn't seem to have much to do with protecting human life before birth. So there would be doctors today in a state of confusion.
Doctors and the population, because there's an educative function in medicine and in science. If we can do it, we will. I suppose the same sort of argument occurs with the atomic bomb. We made it, but I think a lot of the scientists making it would have been thinking we'll never use it, but we did. And we still fear nuclear holocaust. Well, Hippocrates would have said, well over the 2,000 years ago, we should protect life before birth. And somehow or another, that piece of science has been lost. We now discriminate against the unborn who are unwanted or aren't perfect. So if you can manage to survive your human life from conception to birth and then become disabled, you'll be fine. But if you become disabled before you're born, then people will say you're not human, or if they think you're human, you're not worth protecting. There's something wrong in the thinking.
I think it's even going further than that, that people are discussing a period of time after full term that a child can be aborted.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and I'd like to think that that's such a remote and extreme position that we won't get that far, and that as we know more and more about life before birth, where the human being has nothing more after conception than nutrition and time, and it's getting nutrition from the mother, through the mother, and the time to develop, but it's equally dependent. Our fellow human beings are equally dependent the moment after they're born as they were the moment before they were born. And the notion of partial birth abortions, which Victorian law allows for, is just a contradiction as far as I'm concerned about looking after human beings, especially the most vulnerable.
All right, let's look at your family for a moment, and you've had a number of children. Now, tell me some of the diversity that existed there that supports how rich life is when it's given.
Well, I've been heard to say that we've got 7 homemade children and 1 that we brought in, because of our 8 children, the 7th was adopted. And when the others were cruel enough to tell him that he wasn't part of the family, we said he was the only one that wasn't a mistake. Now, that may not be true. But no, they're a pretty mixed bunch, and there's some disability in the family. 2 of our children have cerebral palsy. 1 died from a complication when he was 33 or 2. I'm not too good on ages or birth dates. Yeah, so...
Well, the good point here, and we're going to stop, we're actually going to swap seats with someone who's going to be your wife.
You're going to introduce me to my boss?
Yes, okay, and she's brought you on a journey as well as myself in discussions earlier. So thank you for this short time, and we'll catch up with your better half.
Thank you very much.
You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break with Hugh's wife, Pauline. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and our guest is Pauline McKenzie, the better half of Hugh. Pauline, welcome.
Thank you, Gavin. It's lovely to be here.
It was just good listening to your husband chat away there.
He was amazing, yes. And everything he said is something that we've lived in our married life, but he can express it much better than I can, so good on him.
All right. So at this point where he moves from supporting abortion to pro-life, what were some of the things that you had shared that helped bring about a change?
I think it was probably the influence of my father, who was an obstetrician and gynaecologist in Melbourne from the very early time, and he was always very, very pro-life and was appalled what was happening with the Manhattan ruling. And he and Hugh got on so well together, and they spent many hours chatting about this, and I think that's probably what convinced him. And of course I was very pro-life because of Dad's influence and my mother, but probably more Dad, that I was determined that I would do everything that I could for single mothers at that time.
All right. Now, that's taken you on quite an interesting journey. And can we talk a little about things that happened in Geelong?
Yes. As Hugh mentioned, that we actually had 8 children. And when I saw my way clear that I could actually do something outside the home, I, together with quite a few friends of mine, started Pregnancy Help Geelong. That was about 30 years ago, and I worked there probably for about 20 years or so, and I always said to the other girls that I worked with, who all volunteers, but we were great friends, and I said when I became a grandmother, well, that was it for me, and I stuck to that. And when our first grandchild was born, I finished up at Pregnancy Help and handed over the reins to other people.
And by that you mean younger ones?
Yes. I believe very strongly that it should be younger women helping younger women.
Excellent. Now, SPOD, that stands for?
That's the new name for Pregnancy Help Geelong, and that has happened since I've left there, but it is, I have to think, emotional support. I can't remember now. You might be able to help me.
Emotional support for pregnancy outcome decisions.
Yes, that's right. So Pregnancy Help Geelong is a pro-life, when we started, and still is, pro-life organisation, but the idea is not to tell people what to do about an unplanned pregnancy, but to help the girls look at all sides of the situation and make the decision from that. I was also involved at the time of setting up an educational program to be taken to schools that we called Choices, Decisions and Outcomes, and I believe that is still running in the schools, secondary schools. It's now running throughout Australia, and it's a chastity-based program, but it's really getting young people to look at what they do, that their actions do have outcomes, and that they have to look at all the consequences of those outcomes.
Yes, so cause and effect and consequences are very important to consider, aren't they? So here you are, you've got 8 children.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, seven now. We had 8 children. Yes.
That's right. Now the 8th one, who's now listening to this program from heaven, probably.
No, not. She's not the last. The last, Bryce, who died, was our 6th child.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and then we adopted one after that, and then we had a big surprise at the end as well. I must say that I thought I'd tricked God at one stage, because we had a disabled child, and then we adopted one, and I thought that would be the end of our family, and then all of a sudden I found out I was pregnant again. But thanks to Hugh, I got over that. I was pretty cross at the time when I found out I was pregnant again, but he was so pleased, and he said that he felt at the time that he was much younger than he thought he was, and it was great. And she's been a delight in our lives. She also has a mild disability, but is involved with the Special Olympics and is having a wonderful time there. So we're very proud of her. She's an equestrian.
Okay, so horse riding, hurdles, dressage.
Dressage, yes. She actually competes in able-bodied competition and does very well with that. But certainly her disability really hasn't held her back. We believe that she's reached the potential that she can. She's a part-time childcare worker and leads a very useful life and very fulfilled life herself.
Well, let's take a term from the equestrian world, hurdles. Mm-hmm. And let's go back to this hurdle. Here's you experiencing a pregnancy late in life. Yes. Unexpected.
Well, they call me a grand multipra is the medical term for someone who is an older woman who has several children.
All right. So suddenly it throws you off centre, doesn't it?
It did, because I really wanted to expand my horizons and do things for other people and become my own self and doing things, and here I was pregnant again.
And that's why you were angry?
Yes, it was. I really think, which was so naive, that I had tricked God into thinking, well, we'd done our best and we had all of these children, and they were wonderful, the kids, but it was a busy life, as you can imagine.
Right, and unexpectedly we have this male voice that says...
Yeah, then Hugh said he was so pleased. He almost couldn't believe that I was cross, because he was so delighted, and to have that support was wonderful for me. Yeah, and I think it's really important. And I used to say to the girls at the pregnancy centre, go and find the positive out of this. What is good about this pregnancy? Because you can always find something good about the pregnancy. And you know, I've got some wonderful stories of that time. One very memorable one was a girl who was really, really pressured by her surrounding relationships to have an abortion, but she decided no, that she wouldn't, because she believed this little baby inside her was a life, and that she was going to give it life. And I remember going to visit her after the baby was born, and the little one was lying on the couch, And she looked at this little one and she said, "Smile for Pauline, Laura, because she's the reason why you're here."
On that note, you're watching Support Life. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch and our guest is Pauline McKenzie. Pauline, you were in this moment, a kind of a wow moment, when you hear the mother of the child say your name as the reason for the child living. What did that do?
What did it do? I think I thank God at that moment for the opportunity of being able to counsel that young mother who was a great friend of mine, and for the life of that beautiful little baby. Yeah, it was great.
Now, Australia has actually taken a little bit of notice of what's been happening in your life, and you got an OAM. When was that?
I can't remember.
Well,
a few years back.
Just a few years back.
Yeah,
that's all, yes, there we are.
A few years back, but I'd done quite a few things around. So, and certainly the pregnancy help work was one of the things that it was awarded for.
Yes, and I think that recognition says that there is understanding, support, and embracing the goodness of this kind of work when someone's proactive. Yes,
I hope it does. It certainly. It was such a surprise to receive that award, and certainly I think it was the people around me that really deserved it much better than, that I did. I guess I was nominated for it and that was the way it went, but it was an award for everyone. Yeah,
that's right. So you can think of the letter O as others.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So these wonderful lives that have been spared have such potential. You've told us about your two children in particular, that depending on the term used, maybe would you say were handicapped? What term would you use?
Oh, disabled.
Disabled.
Our son who passed away, if anyone said he was handicapped, he would really go mad and say that really was not the correct term to use, and that you should say disabled. But he led a wonderful life, and we feel very blessed that we were introduced to the area of disability through him, and I think that has certainly helped our younger daughter as well, and led us to work with Riding for the Disabled. Hugh was on the Victorian board for Riding for the Disabled Victoria, opened up a whole new area for us.
And that's the great mystery of life, isn't it? That when we give breath and life to a human being, of what their potential is.
Well, I believe that baby Gammy has just done so much for the world. He's a little Down syndrome baby, and what has he done but shown the world the problems involved with surrogacy, the problems for those poor mothers that are going through it, the problems for, his little sister and everyone else involved with disability. And he's a disabled child. He's enlightened the world. Yeah.
So they are becoming a voice for themselves.
They are. Yeah. And a very strong voice, I might add, particularly if you live with them. They can voice what they feel. So it's great. So look, people think that having a child with a disability is terrible. It's not. It's wonderful. It really opens up the whole world of wonderful people surrounding them. I'm not saying but being hard isn't bad. Being hard can be good. Being hard can be really wonderful. And, if you can run with it and get over that initial shock, because it is a terrible shock to be told that you have a disabled child, and you think, how on earth will you ever manage? And I'll tell you what, it has been a blessing for our family.
So, in another sense, it's not so much disabled, but they're abled in another way. It brings joy. It opens one's mind, one's vision, one's opportunity to bring hope to others.
It certainly does. And the more encouragement that they can have to live in society and for other people to mix with them, you know, it's wonderful, I think, for them. But then I'm biased because I'm the mother of 2 disabled children. Maybe other people think it differently, but I'm certainly very biased that way.
Yes. Well, you mentioned that enlarging their life. Now, one of the 2 children went out and lived in society.
Oh yes, we tried, and I think successfully got him to live independently. We had all sorts of problems with that as well, but he did manage, and I think that I learnt very early is to actually stand up for him, and really to get him to fit into where he lived. I remember the schooling options weren't wonderful, and he left school at the end, probably the end of year 8 or 9, and we were advised for him to go and work in a sheltered workshop. And I took him there the first day, and that's what the authorities had told us to do. And when I dropped him off, I felt terrible, and I just knew that that wasn't the place for him. And when I went to pick him up that afternoon, he said, "Don't you ever, ever do that to me again." And I said, "Sorry, I won't." But then he went on to he got a job, and he was all right, and he was fine. Yeah.
Good. What job did he manage?
Well, he was able to manage, it was sort of like clerical work, so he'd put the stamps on the letters, and he'd make the coffee, and he'd answer the phone, and he couldn't write terribly well, but he was able to write enough to write notes for his boss. He had a wonderful boss who really looked after him. And then the other side of that story was that he had acting as a hobby, and he loved his acting. So he was allowed to go off to be extras in these various television shows, and he made friends with all the television personalities. He had a wonderful life, loved it.
Right, now there was one particular actress who gave him the time of day. Who was that?
Yes, that was Sigrid Thornton. He was an extra in Sea Change when it was filmed at Bowen Heads, and we lived down in that area at that time. Sigrid was wonderful to him, and he had his photo taken with her, and then she wrote him a lovely note afterwards. And then when he was dying, our son decided that he would contact Sigrid and just inform her that Bryce was not well and that he was dying. So he sent her agent an email. It took him a lot of courage to do that. He didn't really want to do it, but in the end he did. And what happened was, when our son went to a restaurant the next day, who should be there in Victoria but Sigrid, and she then sent him some wonderful messages which really made a huge difference to him. Bryce then said, "Now I can die a happy man," he said at the end of it.
Pauline, on that high note, I thank you, and thank you for reminding us that it takes others to contribute to lives and extend them. You're watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.